The Democratic response so far to the looming overturning of Roe v. Wade has been to schedule a vote on codifying Roe v. Wade into law in the Senate next week. But immediately, there were quote-unquote concerns being expressed by Susan Collins, as Jake Sherman posted here. Susan Collins has since come out and said that she will not vote to codify Roe v. Wade into law, citing these concerns about Catholic hospitals. She and Lisa Murkowski offered to put forward some type of compromise legislation. Chuck Schumer said, no, we're not going to compromise on this. We're going to put our bill on the floor. The bill does not have the votes to overcome a filibuster, does not even have the votes if there wasn't a filibuster. That leaves the party so far with rallies on the Supreme Court steps. Here's Senator Amy Klobuchar recently in a speech.
So do not, despite the startling nature of what we read, do not give up the fight. Because to me, the fight has just begun. We will take this fight to the state houses, and we will take this fight to the U.S. Congress and the U.S. Senate right across the street.
That, of course, did not sound like a plan to most Democrats around the country, one of them being actually California Governor Gavin Newsom, who said this at a press briefing.
Where the hell's my party? Where's the Democratic Party? Why aren't we standing up more firmly, more resolutely? Why aren't we calling this out? This is a concerted, coordinated effort. And yes, they're winning. They are. They have been. Let's acknowledge that. We need to stand up. Where's the counteroffensive?
And the unwillingness to talk about abortion and to use the word abortion has left Democrats tongue-tied when they have tried to talk about it. Here's President Biden responding to the issue.
So the idea that we're going to make a judgment that is going to say that no one can make the judgment to choose to abort a child based on a decision by the Supreme Court, I think goes way overboard.
We're joined now by Shaunna Thomas, who is Executive Director of UltraViolet, a women's rights organization. Thank you so much for joining us, Shaunna.
Thanks for having me.
So what has been your reaction to not just the Democratic response to this leaked opinion, but the last several years of Democratic politics around abortion rights? What should they have been doing compared to what they have been doing?
Well, all the polling in the world, on top of just the moral, right, the ethical thing that they should be doing is being on offense on this. We shouldn't be seeing Democrats just defend status quo at any point. They should have been working really hard to expand access to the full range of reproductive health rights services, including abortion. It has been kind of a major point of contention for reproductive health rights and justice advocates and for providers of abortions that Roe v. Wade has really been the floor, right, of the bare minimum of what's needed, the legal right. But millions of people have not had the access they need for a long time. And the culmination of really 30 years of investment in state legislatures and packing the court sort of got us to this moment. This did not just emerge all of a sudden. This shouldn't shock anyone. They've been telling us they're planning to do this for a long time. And so it is welcome, right, certainly on the part of senators. It would be welcome were it to come from the president to recognize this moment for what it is, a stage 5 fire at this stage. But don't come at it at this point with a small bucket. You haven't been doing what you need to do to preserve rights and to expand access. But now that we're here, we need you to really step up and lean into this moment, recognize it for what it is, and do what we need, do everything you can possible to both stop, right, what's happening in the courts, but and do what you need to do in the states to make sure that people can get the healthcare they need.
So it seems to me that the sticking point Ryan mentioned in the Jake Sherman report about Susan Collins is over Catholic hospitals. And so I guess the obvious question there is, why should Catholic hospitals not have conscious protection, and why should they perform abortions?
Look, Susan Collins says she wants there to be a carve out for Catholic hospitals. She wants them to have the right to decide that the life of a fetus is more important than the life of the mother. That's hugely problematic in the sense that there are, I think it's something like 1 in 7 hospitals are Catholic. There are so many people who go to hospitals and don't even know it's a Catholic hospital, and that their life could be compromised because of a carve out like that. And look, she may be serious, but it could also be an excuse, because look, it usually is with her, right? It's very hard to take someone seriously who claims to be pro-life, but takes, Kavanaugh and Alito at their word that they consider Roe settled law, when all the indicators pointed to them being put on the court for the purpose of overturning or severely curbing it.
So
I don't think she's
question on
considered
that,
a factor.
One question on that is if it's the case that Democrats should sort of get their acts together and do something about, to protect, as you say, the rights here, then why not at least negotiate with Susan Collins and look at the compromise legislation that takes a provision like that and makes it easier for them to get to the votes they need?
So there's 2 issues with it. One is, if there was a real belief and a real theory that you could pass something like this with, let's say, even 52 votes, they'd still have to be willing to end the filibuster to get there. That's still not a path to 60. I understand that Schumer's office and that, various advocates, their thinking around this is, look, this is not passing with 60 votes. So let's put forward the version that we need and that protects the most number of lives and puts the right kind of, puts the right law in place. Right. Interestingly, Chuck Schumer decided not to put forward the one that passed the House that included a set of findings that made very clear kind of the impact of abortion restrictions and abortion bans on most vulnerable people in society, around the roots of misogyny and racism behind restrictions on abortions and birth control, and that,
there's some roots on the other side of the argument, though, too, in terms of racism. And the Planned Parenthood has plenty of racist history.
Well, that's true, and I think they surely own that. But the idea that really what I'm naming is that it's the approach that the Democrats are taking right now isn't super coherent. They're saying we're not going to put forward a compromise bill because we can't get to 60, but we're also not going to put forward the bill that advocates have been calling for, that the progressive movement really wants to see in there, that passed the House. Right. So they actually are putting forward a compromise in order to presumably protect a number of, to get as many Democrats as they can on the record. And look, good, take the vote, put everyone on the record. But if you're going to compromise to actually pass something, then sure, go ahead and do that. But that's not what they're doing. They're not putting pressure on Susan Collins. They're not putting pressure on Lisa Murkowski. They're not putting pressure on Kristen Sinema to support overturning the filibuster. They are performing, right? Right. And I think it is important for people to see where their senator, where elected officials stand on whether women or anyone who can become pregnant should have control over their own bodies. But like I said, this is a stage 5 fire, so don't come at it with a small bucket, right? And we need results. We need them now. And I mean, truly, everything is on the line. If you can't do it in this moment, then what can people trust you to do in any other?
What about the question of federally funded clinics? Because if you are going to have states, let's say 26 states or whatever the number is at this point, that are going to immediately move to ban abortion, the only way around that, besides a constitutional amendment that completely legalizes abortion and enshrines Roe v. Wade, the only way around that would be federally funded clinics in those states. Is that something that Democrats are now considering? Like, in other words, is this controversy kind of radicalizing people and putting them in these diametric camps? Or are Democrats still kind of stuck in we support Hyde and we want to compromise our way into a reasonable place here?
I think it's fair to say that there is more on the table now than there ever has been before. the question is there enough, right? Is there enough of an understanding of what's at stake? Are people really absorbing that up to 26 states are going to move to ban abortion, and that means 36 million women are going to live in states where abortion is severely restricted or banned, and the pressure that's going to put on other states that are not set up to support all of the people who are going to require abortions and need to go there, and that's for the lucky ones, right? So I do think that it's on the table. I don't see, what I'm not seeing yet is a real commitment to moving these ideas and these solutions in a way that can succeed and is going to be successful. And I think that's going to take really determined, very clear leadership from the president and from Democratic leaders across the board.
Yeah, so The Atlantic had a long story that they published a couple of weeks ago about the expansion of chemical abortion in different states, and a lot of that has been pushed by pro-choice groups, nonprofit groups like yours in different states around the country. Although the massive expansion of that, frankly, it makes me nervous, and I'm curious about that from your perspective, because it's some women have just horrible experiences with these chemical abortions because they're not prepared. They don't expect what happens after they take those pills. As somebody who tracks that issue and advocates on behalf of this expansion, a lot of this happens outside of doctors' offices, and that's sort of the push going forward. Do you have any concerns about this rapid and also like pretty massive expansion happening around the country?
There is a massive expansion to create safe options for people, right? And part of making medical, a medical abortion available, a pill available, is that a chemical abortion available is the education around what to expect, when to take it, right? Who can, right? And based on who you are, your profile, right, that you can be doing it with the guidance of practitioners, of people who are experienced, whether they're getting that through, a provider or a nurse practitioner. I mean, the expansion of telemedicine, I think, because of the pandemic, I think creates significantly more opportunities for people to get kind of the support that they need when they're pursuing that as an option where others are no longer available. There's in our minds, they're creating safe, kind of proven ways to access to abortion, to terminate a pregnancy if you need to or want to, is really, creating those opportunities is incredibly important, because what we have seen historically is when people don't have access to something that is safe, that is that maybe, that may create some discomfort, but can be managed and mitigated, with support and with the right amount of education, so much better, so far exceeds, right, the safety of any other method, right, that people have used historically. I mean, trying to end your own pregnancy without one that's facilitated by something like a pill or a medical doctor or a nurse practitioner or a midwife, right, has led to just countless deaths. And that's the situation we're in right now. Is like, how do you make sure that people can survive through a crisis like this? And medical abortion is one of those, I think, very promising solutions.
And you've also been pushing on the corporate side. UltraViolet's been pressuring major corporations who have been donating to Republicans who supported this push. Is that gaining any traction?
So we have been running a campaign for 2 years, calling on companies like AT&T, Comcast, Disney, who have been supporting kind of extremist Republicans up and down the ballot for years. And I would say at this moment, we are seeing more momentum and I think real conversations inside major corporations about what their obligation is to their own employees and to their consumers, and real concerns about what happens to their brand and in the event that they don't take steps. the steps that we're seeing major corporations take, even Bank of America, right, stepped into this space a couple days ago, where they're saying, look, we recognize that this is a major threat. We recognize that that this is actually a business threat as much as it is a health threat to our own employees and our own customers. We're going to take a set of steps to make it possible for employees to access abortion. A number of other companies have done the same thing. What we're saying is, that's nice. That's great. We appreciate your statement as well, that you support, women's right to choose, that you believe in gender and racial equality. But if those value statements aren't matching your political giving, if you're actively, shoring up and supporting legislators, I mean, more than 110 companies gave over $5 million to legislators who sponsored laws passed in 2021 in 16 states that have restricted access to abortions. If those companies are making these statements and yet funding these same anti-abortion legislators, we need to call that out, and we need to get them to change their behavior. Not only because we need to try to start to defund these legislators, but because we need them to set a standard. We need corporations to step in here where, frankly, legislators are not, even on the Democratic side, to say what's acceptable and what isn't.
Something I love about the show is that we're 15 minutes deep into this interview, and you just don't get that on cable, especially people on both sides here. And so I just do have one more question about the clip President Biden that Ryan referenced earlier, where President Biden references the child. And this is a long-standing debate in the pro-choice movement about sort of rhetoric, how to refer. Do you just sort of openly say, what, if you think it's a child, do you refer to it as a child? There's a Naomi Wolf essay from 1995 where she talks about this. And I was at the Supreme Court the other night. It did seem like there was increasing comfort with saying, this is a woman's right. You may think it is a life, but it is a woman's right even so. How have you seen that sort of shift, and where do you come down on that question of, when President Biden referred to a child?
I think it's a strange thing to do, to refer to a fetus as a child. I think it's the question of whether we should, how we should think about or talk about what is true about, what's happening inside a woman's body when she's pregnant and the state of a fetus. It feels like a total distraction to me, because the bottom line is that the decision and the need to have an abortion varies. I mean, the reasons can be extremely complicated. They can come at very different stages. And there's just no reason for the government to play or any sort of role in figuring out where a line is, when it's acceptable to determine when and if a woman can have abortion. This is healthcare. This is a conversation that should be happening between the pregnant person and their doctor.
The woman.
And I'm sorry?
I said the woman and her doctor.
Okay, as we know, there are people who can be pregnant who do not identify as women. So no, I wouldn't just limit it to women. I would say anybody who can become pregnant should be able to make that decision with their doctor. There's just no point at which we need to have government intervention. And and frankly, it ties the hands of people who are trying to serve both, right? People want everybody involved in here to be healthy and to have healthy lives and be able to survive something like this. It's just unacceptable that we would want to put restrictions in place that could possibly lead to a pregnant person dying. That there's no way to ground that in ethics. There's no way to ground that in anything that makes sense. So
Sure. No, the last thing I would say is just if you see it as a life, it makes more sense. It complicates the equation significantly, I would say. But if you have disagreement on that point, then that it totally makes sense.
Although one point on that, in Louisiana now, they're now trying to amend the law. Currently, they were going for you cannot abort any life, quote unquote life, after implantation.
Right.
They're now amending that to fertilization. Their belief is that life is when it has become fertilized, which means IUDs, birth control, most IVF,
Plan B,
Plan B, most forms of birth control, contraception, would be criminalized in Louisiana, and they're also moving to involve the woman in the crime. Like she would be charged as well. So if you say that's a life, then okay, the pill is gone.
People can hold that belief if they'd like to. I still don't have any idea what that has to do with whether or not the government should be making laws about healthcare.
That's my take on it. If you want to believe that, that's fine. Like that's I don't believe that, but if other people do, okay.
Okay, I believe in the 14th Amendment, so I believe if something is alive, it has the protection to life without with due process. So we should probably leave it there. But I will say, Shaunna, you have been extremely generous with your time and with your willingness to answer questions, and I really appreciate that, and I know Ryan does too.
Indeed.
Appreciate you having me. Thanks.
Thanks. We'll be back with more Rising after this.